Let's talk about CVs today. Let's start with your basic lineup. This is what's called your Type 1 CV, your Type 2, 930, 934, and 935. The Type 1 CV is found on Volkswagen Type 1s. Generally, this isn't a race prep CV, so if I try to push it apart, you'll see how tight it is. The Type 2 is also called a bus CV, found on VW buses, some smaller race cars. You can look at the size, it's a 33 spline CV. Type 1s aren't used very much. One of the most popular CVs is a 930. This is a 930 type. It's a 28 spline. This one happens to be race prep, so it's loose. This is a 934 CV. This one happens to be a Gear 1 Super CV. This one is also race prep. This one has 33 splines. And you can see a 935, which is the same physical size of a 934, but it's a 35 spline. Bigger axle, more performance. One thing you'll notice is that the bolt sizes are different on the CVs. On a 930, they're generally 3/8 of an inch. From the factory, most of the initial 934s were 7/16 of an inch, and now most of them have been drilled to 1/2 inch. So all of our super CVs are drilled to 1/2 inch. Our CVs that are a lower quality, such as an MP CV, some race prep and non-race prep, are available in 7/16 or 1/2 inch. Generally, you can see by the width of the CVs that as they get bigger, they get wider. And there's more surface area in the CV, providing greater protection. Now, let's talk about the CVs and how they're made up. So I'm gonna pull apart a CV and I'm gonna show you the basics of how they work. And I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with one of the 934s. That's the easiest way to look at it. Generally, CVs from the factory will have a line on them. And these are all race prep CVs, and these are made to go inside a midboard hub or be used so they don't have a line. But on this Type 1, you can see that line. The line on the CV generally is made to go to the hub. So whether it's the outside where the wheel is or the transmission side, the line always goes towards the hub. When you're assembling the CV will have a cage, and the two sides of the cage will be different. If you look at this side of the cage, you can see how thin it is. Oh, I should mention, the CV is broken up of many pieces. The outside is called a race, just like you would if it's a bearing, because the CV is a bearing. The inside is called the star. What holds it all together is the cage, and then those are the balls. And all of the modern CVs have the same number of balls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're gonna learn a little bit more about that. But going back to the cage, you can see one side of the cage is flat like that. The other side is smaller and flatter. Now this inside, smaller and flatter side of the cage will always go towards the line. So I mentioned that a lot of CVs have a line, that's the back. You're always gonna put the smaller side of the cage towards the back, towards the flange. If there's no line on the CV, you're always gonna put the smaller side, again, towards the flange, because as the CV moves, the star moves in the CV, it's gonna work better if it's set up like that. The other thing you're gonna notice is that the CV has, if we look at the race, it has a small and a large, and a small and a large, and a small and a large, and a small and a large area. You'll notice that the star is a line, the small lines to the large assigns to the small, small to large to small to large, etc. You'll also notice on the star there's a flat side and there's a race side. Now, many people believe that the race side has to go towards the hub or towards the line. That's not necessarily true. We usually start them out like that, but when you go through your CVs and you're gonna work with them probably at least twice a season, you'll take the CV apart, clean it, and put it back together. And if you see wear on the star, you can literally turn the star around. Now, the only time you can't do that is if you have a CV that has a undercut, or what we call a center bore. Let me grab a CV star and show you what a center bore looks like. This particular CV is a little beat up, you can see that, but it has a flat side and it has a raised side, and the raised side has been centered bored down. This is done so that if you have too short an axle or too much droop in your trailing arm, the axle isn't going to pull the CV apart by pulling the star out, and we'll talk about that more. But this is a center bore. When you have a center bore star, they generally don't last as long because you can't turn them around. And we'll talk about this later, but what happens is the star gets significant wear and transfer a metal like this, and if you were to turn this around, you could probably eliminate that wear for a certain amount of time. So that's what the counter bore star looks like, and you can see it's a little shorter. Also, counter bores, depending on the brand and quality of the star, if you counter bore the star too much, it could crack. And this happens to be a 930 star, and that's about the most you can counter bore it, which is about 90 thousandths. I've seen people go to 250 thousandths on these. They will either strip out or they'll crack over time. On a 934, you can usually go 120 thousandths, unless it's a Pro-Am Pro Star, and you can take those down probably 250 thousandths without a problem. That star is harder than the back of Superman's head, so they don't go bad very often. Okay, let's pull one of these apart and take a look at it. And to pull them apart, it's pretty simple. I'll probably lose some bolts all over the table. And there they are. These are all the components. So this happens to be a Gear 1 Super CV. We think it's the finest quality one on the market today. Gear 1 manufactures these. They're made of a high alloy steel. They're also REM polished and cryo treated. So they probably have the most strength of any CV out there, with the exception of possibly a Pro-Am, which is very expensive. This is an alloy cage. Generally, the alloys are either 4130 or 300M. Most people prefer the 300M alloy cage. Compared to a stock cage, the cage is round, it's open, it's much thicker and much stronger. This is a star. Again, this is a hardened star. It's broached out to 33 splines in this particular star, and you can see it has a small raised section and a flat section. And as we assemble these, again, we're going to pay attention. On this particular one, Gear 1 is on the face. We usually put that to the front towards the axle. The other side is away from the axle where the line would be. And as we're assembling this, now you can see the cage. One side is flatter than the other. What's interesting is if you try to assemble the star into the cage on the flat side, it won't go. So the star has to be put in from the other direction. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to put in to the cage. And most of the time, the stars will go right into the cage, and you'll see what I did in this case is I put the flat section to the flat section. And I told you sometimes what we do is we build them this way, flat section, which again is going to the back. You'll also notice that the balls have been REM polished and they're hardened, and they've also been cryo treated. So the entire CV has been cryo treated. As I assemble this CV, you're going to notice two things. Number one, I'm going to line up the holes. I'm going to line up the holes from the race and the star, and I'm going to make sure that the large area is against the small area. And I'll just start by putting a ball in from the front like this. Hard to do when you're on camera doing this, otherwise it takes me 10 seconds. And I'm going to assemble this like this, and I'm going to move over to the other side and do them like this. And then the third one I'm going to put in just opposite that one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure and look at it again and go, did I do it right? Is the flat side of the cage towards the back? Is this towards the back? And am I go large, small, large, small? Now, I'm going to assemble the rest of this very quickly. And you'll see, just put them quickly on the table here, it's a little easier. And of course, nothing's ever easy when you're in a hurry. Even those of us who have done this 5,000 times, still occasionally that happens. Then that's assembled, and you can see if we're going to put this in the car, we're going to face this side towards the axle, and that's it. Same thing is true how we assemble these. Now, I mentioned these are all race prepped, so they're very easy to move. I'll show you one other, and this one is a little tighter, only because this happens to be a different brand and it's coated. So once it wears a little, it'll get looser. This is the other type of CV, which is called a lightened CV. Some people prefer a lightened CV. The lightened CV has one advantage, especially when you use it on the transmission side of the car. The heat from the transmission will actually transfer to the CV and to the axle. and you want to cool it. And so up at the transmission area, as long as you're using the right boot that we're going to talk about, you can actually cool the CV better because there's fins on the CV. Does this really weaken the CV? Well, it depends on the CV. This one happens to be a Pro-Am, super high quality CV. So I would say it won't be weakened when it's lightened, but the fins in here will actually work like a heat sink and remove the heat away from both the transmission, helping the transmission live longer, and out of the CV itself. The transmission will usually put so much heat into the CV that what will happen is the grease will actually start to run out of the CV, which is a bad thing. Now that we looked at all that, let's look at CV flanges and boots.